Fall break came with a strange quiet this year. I was 20 years old, a sophomore in college out in Massachusetts, and I'd been looking forward to a few days back home in Connecticut. My classes were getting heavy, and honestly, I just wanted a weekend where I didn't have to think too hard. Just home-cooked meals, my childhood bed, and a little time to breathe. But there was something different this time. The house felt smaller than I remembered. My parents, good, traditional people, still ran the place like it was 2010. No shoes in the living room, no phones at dinner, and definitely no talk of weed. Not that they ever suspected I smoked. I made sure of that. It was Saturday evening, and they'd been invited to a formal banquet fundraiser for some local charity. Ties and pearls, valet parking, the whole thing. They told me not to wait up. I assured them I wouldn't. As soon as their car pulled down the street, I grabbed my small glass bong from its sock-wrapped hiding spot in my backpack. I didn't dare smoke in the house. No way I'd get the smell out in time. But I had a secret weapon, the Treehouse. Yeah, it was still there. Built when I was 8, reinforced when I was 12, and now barely holding on at 20. It was tucked into the branches of an old oak in the front yard, high enough to feel hidden, but just solid enough to sit comfortably. My parents never thought twice about it anymore. I figured it was the perfect spot, outdoors, private, and with a clear view of the house. The October air was crisp, but not freezing. I climbed up with a flashlight, my phone, and a hoodie. The treehouse creaked slightly under my weight, but it held. From up there, I could see the street and our long gravel driveway snaking toward the front steps. I lit up as the sun dipped behind the trees, the sky bleeding orange into violet. For a while, everything felt peaceful, familiar. But then, just past 9, the porch light flicked on. I sat up straight. The house was supposed to be empty. I pulled out my phone, checked the time again, and stared through the branches. Sure enough, the front hallway light turned on too. My first thought was that my parents came home early, but they would have called, they always called, and I hadn't heard the car. Then I saw them. 3 people, hooded, moving low, emerged from the shadows on the far side of the yard, where the hedges break toward the neighbor's fence. They circled the house like they knew it. I pressed myself flat against the floor of the treehouse, peering between the gaps in the wood. My heart was already racing, and I hadn't even seen what happened next. The front door opened. A 4th person, already inside, let them in. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I felt my chest start to burn. The 4 of them disappeared into the house. The door clicked shut behind them. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely type. I opened the keypad and dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up immediately. I kept my voice low, barely a whisper. "There are people in my house," I said. "I'm outside. I saw them break in." The operator stayed calm, asked for my address, told me to stay on the line, said officers were on their way. But then, the screen's soft glow betrayed me. One of them had come back outside, just a shadow at first. Then I saw the glint of something in his hand, maybe a flashlight, maybe something else. He turned and looked right at me. I knew instantly that he saw the light. He said something I couldn't hear, turned, and started walking. No, running, toward the tree. I dropped the phone. "He's coming up," I whispered to the dispatcher, not even sure if the call was still connected. The man reached the base of the ladder. He was tall, thin, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low. I heard the first step creak as he started to climb. I looked around, desperate for anything to defend myself with. My hands landed on my bong, still warm from earlier. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. He was halfway up. I could see his hands gripping the wood. I stood and waited until he was near the top. Then I swung with everything I had. The bong hit him square in the forehead. It shattered on impact. He let out a sharp grunt and lost his grip, falling backward and crashing onto the ground below. He hit hard, hard enough that I winced. For a second, everything went still. Then he screamed, "I see him! He's in the treehouse!" The others came running out the back door. I saw flashlights and heard their footsteps pounding across the grass. But none of them climbed the tree. Instead, they hoisted up their injured friend and tore through the backyard, disappearing into the woods just as the first flashing red and blue lights came down the road. It wasn't 5 minutes later that the officers found me. They checked the house, cleared every room. Nothing was stolen, at least nothing obvious. But drawers had been opened, closets rifled through. One window was broken. A small crowbar was left on the kitchen counter. They took my statement, then waited with me until my parents came home, stunned and horrified. One officer, a tired-looking guy with a salt and pepper beard, pulled me aside as my mom cried in the driveway. "This wasn't random," he said. "They knew you'd be gone, or thought you were. Maybe knew your folks had an event." He handed me a card. "If you remember anything else, even something small, call me." I nodded, but my brain felt numb. That night, I didn't sleep, neither did my parents. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking weak coffee and replaying the scene over and over. I never told them about the weed. That seemed irrelevant now. The next morning, they installed new locks and scheduled a security system install, cameras, motion lights. My dad even bought a bat and left it by the front door. But it didn't help me sleep. Back at college, I pretended I was fine, told my friends the story like it was an anecdote, a wild little tale from fall break. Everyone laughed at the part where I used my bong as a weapon. Someone even called me Weedwick for a week. But the laughs didn't follow me back to my dorm. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if those people would ever come back. Not for me, for my parents. I know the police never found them. No arrests, no follow-ups. It's like they vanished into the trees. But sometimes I wonder, was the fourth person someone we knew? A neighbor? A classmate? Someone who'd been in the house before? Someone who knew the layout, knew the schedule, knew when they'd be gone? And I keep thinking about that one broken rule, that one guilty thing. If I hadn't gone up there to smoke, if I'd just stayed in my room or gone out that night, would I have seen anything at all? But I haven't used that treehouse since. I don't think I ever will. We moved to Potomac, Maryland when I was 11. My dad had landed a high-paying job at some federal agency, one of those positions so vague and bureaucratic it might as well have been made up. We'd spent all of our lives tucked away in a worn-down farmhouse in backwoods Pennsylvania, where the floors creaked like they were whispering secrets, and cell reception was a fantasy. When the job came through, we packed up everything and left, without looking back. The house in Potomac was unreal, vaulted ceilings. A kitchen so clean it barely looked used. The kind of place that smelled like lemon polish and ambition. I shared it with my parents and two older brothers, Jake and Tyler. They were 14 and 16, already slipping into that distant too cool phase. But the best part, the one thing that felt like it was just for me, was the treehouse. It wasn't your typical kid-made plywood fort. This thing was professional grade. 3 levels high, with reinforced beams, a shingled roof, and even lighting. A little spiral staircase wound around one of the thicker trunks and led to a covered balcony where you could see the whole yard and part of the neighboring woods. My brothers loved it for the first few weeks. But like most things in their lives, the novelty wore off. They moved on to girls, guitars, and TikTok. I, on the other hand, claimed it as my kingdom. It was my castle in the sky. That's where I found the first note. It was folded neatly on the small wooden table, up on the second level. I'd been building Lego battle scenes up there that day, pretending the treehouse was a command center. When I saw the note, I figured it had to be from Jake or Tyler. A joke, maybe a secret mission. The paper was crinkled and yellowed, like it had been torn from an old notebook. The handwriting was jagged, like the writer didn't use pens very often. "Hello, I'm the Candy Keeper. Want to play a game?" I grinned like an idiot. My brothers had finally come around. Maybe they were trying to make it fun for me again. I scribbled a reply on the back, "Yes." "Who are you, really?" I left it on the same table. The next day, another note was there. "I guard the sweet things. Tell me your favorite candy, and I'll tell you mine." I played along, wrote gummy bears, and left it there. The back and forth went on for a few days. Each time, the replies got a little weirder. At first, it was harmless. "Do you like chocolate that melts in your mouth, or the kind that gets stuck in your teeth?" Then, "Do you like tricks more than treats?" And then, "Which window is yours?" That one stopped me cold. Up until then, I'd thought it was a game. A sweet, maybe slightly creepy game from one of my brothers. But this wasn't playful. This wasn't even clever. It was personal. That night at dinner, I asked Jake and Tyler if they were messing with me. Jake laughed. "Dude, I haven't been up there in weeks." Tyler didn't even look up from his phone. "Treehouse is lame. Stop being a baby." They swore it wasn't them, and something in their tone, I believed them. That night, I locked my window for the first time since we'd moved. Still, I barely slept. Every creak in the walls sounded like a footstep. Every rustle of wind became breath. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 delicate taps against my window. I froze under the covers, the air in the room suddenly cold. I didn't breathe. My fingers dug into my bed sheets like they were the only thing keeping me anchored to this world. After a minute, the tapping stopped. When morning came, I slowly crept over and peeked outside. That's when I saw 5 gummy bears, my favorite, neatly taped in a row on the outside of my window. Red, green, yellow, red, orange, like a sick little offering. I showed my parents. They assumed it was one of my brothers being dumb. When confronted, both denied it. Mom told me to stop reading scary books. Dad said he'd check the locks, but I knew it wasn't Jake or Tyler. That night, I made a plan. I grabbed my flashlight and kept it beside me in bed. I left the curtains open just a sliver, enough to see but not enough to be obvious. And I waited. 1:47 a.m. Tap, tap, tap. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. I rolled over slowly, grabbed the flashlight, and pulled the curtains open in one swift motion. And there he was. Not Jake, not Tyler, an old man, pressed against the glass like a moth hungry for light. His skin looked paper-thin and gray, stretched over his skull. His teeth were yellow and rotted, with bits of something dark stuck between them. His eyes? God, his eyes. They were yellow, too, not sickly or jaundiced, glowing, like a pair of spoiled egg yolks leaking through his sockets. He smiled. I screamed. Everything after that is a blur. My parents rushed in, my dad yelling, my mom crying. The man was gone by the time they got to my room. They didn't doubt me, not this time. Not after they saw the fresh smears on the outside of the window, like something had pressed its face flat against the glass. The police came. They searched the yard, the woods, the treehouse. Nothing. No fingerprints, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. But the gummy bears. They took those. For evidence, they said. The investigation lasted weeks. I had to talk to a sketch artist, child psychologist. Officer Daniels came back a few times just to check in. He never said it directly, but I think he believed me, even if he didn't want to. They never found the candy keeper. We put floodlights in the backyard, cameras. My dad even nailed the treehouse shut. I never went back up there. Years passed. I grew up, left home, got married, had kids of my own. But every Thanksgiving or Christmas when we visit my parents, I see that treehouse, still standing. Sometimes I swear the wood smells like sugar, and at night, if the wind's just right, I'll hear a faint rustling through the branches, like paper, folding. I don't eat gummy bears anymore. You don't realize how loud silence can be until the house empties out. My son Owen left for college last fall. The house has been so quiet since then that I sometimes find myself walking into his old room for no reason, expecting to hear music playing or see him half asleep with a book still open in his hands. But the room's always still now, just 4 walls and some forgotten posters peeling at the corners. I tell myself, I'm just being sentimental. It's part of the process, right? Letting go. But lately, a particular memory's been crawling back, one I've tried to forget for years. It happened when Owen was 9. Back then, we lived on the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac in western Maryland, the kind of place where streetlights flickered out early and neighbors kept to themselves. Our backyard sloped gently into the woods. Beyond the tree line, it was nothing but forest for miles. You could walk for an hour and not see another house. As a carpenter, I was always building something, shelves, benches, toy chests. But the treehouse, that was special. I poured everything I had into it. It wasn't some half-rotten shack nailed to a branch. It was a fortress, fully enclosed with real windows, an insulated roof, even a little bunk where Owen could nap if he wanted. It sat high above the ground, nestled in a sturdy maple at the very edge of our property line. He loved that place, and at first, I loved that he loved it. It got him off screens and out into the air. He'd spend hours up there, just reading, drawing, or looking through his little binoculars into the woods. Then came Reed. Owen mentioned him casually over dinner one night. Reed doesn't like macaroni, he said between bites. My wife and I looked at each other. Who's Reed? She asked. My treehouse friend, Owen said, smiling. He lives in the woods. We both laughed, assuming it was an imaginary friend. Pretty normal stuff for a 9-year-old. And honestly, I thought it was kind of sweet. He'd always been a bit of a daydreamer, but things changed fast. He became different, distant. He didn't laugh as much. He started whispering to himself even when we were around. We'd call for him, and he wouldn't answer right away, just stare off, like he was listening for something far away. One morning, he came inside with a swollen black eye. We panicked, of course. My wife rushed to grab ice while I knelt in front of him and asked what had happened. He hesitated, then said, "Reed got mad." I felt a chill crawl down my back. "Reed hit you?" I asked. He nodded. "But it's okay. He said sorry after. He just gets sad when I talk too much about you guys." We took him to the pediatrician, who said it could have been a fall, maybe from the ladder, but Owen stuck to the same story. Reed had done it. That night, my wife and I argued. She thought he was making it up, maybe acting out, trying to cope with something. But I knew my son. There was something real in his voice, something scared. So I decided to check the treehouse. It was late afternoon when I climbed up. The air inside was thick with the smell of sweat and something else, like old food. I flipped the light switch we'd installed and looked around. And what I saw? There were things that didn't belong to Owen. A pile of crumpled fast food wrappers in the corner, a cracked plastic plate with some moldy crumbs on it, 2 pairs of children's shoes, far too small for my son. One red, one gray. Both were worn thin. I checked the cubby under the bench and found more socks. Dirty, some mismatched. No way they'd all come from our laundry room. Then I saw the walls. They were covered in drawings, pages torn from Owen's sketch pad, taped and stapled all over. The drawings were all of animals, rabbits, owls, deer. But they were wrong, not cartoonish, not childlike. They had wide, empty eyes, some with extra limbs or distorted faces. One drawing showed a line of children wearing masks shaped like animals, standing hand in hand in the woods. And then there was the spider. It was huge, drawn in thick pencil, with 8 long legs that curled like vines. Its face had been scribbled out so violently that the paper had torn. The words, "He sees you when you sleep," were written underneath in smudged graphite. I stumbled out of the treehouse in a daze. My first thought was that someone, something, had been living in there. Maybe a runaway kid, or something worse. I told my wife, and we locked the treehouse hatch that night. I left the porch light on and sat by the window, watching the backyard. At 2:13 a.m., I saw movement. Something, or someone, climbing down from the treehouse. I rushed out with a flashlight and a hammer in hand. The figure hit the ground running, but not like a kid. No stumble. He moved fast. Too fast. The light caught his back just briefly, just enough to see that it was a child, thin, shirtless, covered in dirt. His ribs showed through his skin. I shouted for him to stop, but he darted into the trees like a deer. I chased after him for maybe 30 feet before realizing I was alone in the woods with nothing but a hammer and a bad feeling. I called the police the next morning. They searched the entire area, brought in dogs, interviewed neighbors, nothing. No footprints, no DNA, no reports of missing kids matching the description. The cops told me what cops always say. If something turns up, we'll let you know. But nothing ever did. Owen was quiet for a while after that. He'd stopped mentioning Reed, and for a time, we thought the worst had passed. Then one night, just before bed, I found him sitting at the top of the stairs, crying softly. I sat beside him and asked what was wrong. He looked up at me with wet eyes and said, "Reed's mad at me again." "I thought Reed was gone," I said gently. "He said I ruined everything," Owen whispered. "He said the forest doesn't want me anymore." "What does that mean, buddy?" Owen shook his head. "He said I was supposed to stay, that I made a promise. He wanted me to go live with him and the others, the ones with the names." "What names?" He wiped his nose with his sleeve. "Fox, rabbit, owl. They don't talk like people, but he understands them." My stomach dropped. "Are they real?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he whispered, "They live where the sun doesn't go." That was the last time he mentioned Reed. We tore down the treehouse a few weeks later. I didn't care that I'd spent months building it. I wanted it gone. I wanted every trace of that place scrubbed from our lives. Years passed. Owen grew up. He became healthy, thoughtful, even-keeled. He never brought it up again. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he chose to forget. But I didn't. Even now, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear footsteps on the roof or something tapping on the glass. And once, not too long ago, I took the dog out before dawn and swore I saw a small shape standing at the edge of the woods. Just a silhouette. I blinked and it was gone. Was Reed real? I don't know. But something was in that treehouse. And whatever it was, it wanted my son. There are parts of my childhood I've learned to laugh about. The tantrums, the slamming doors, the eye rolls so dramatic I swear I saw the back of my own brain. I was a difficult kid, 13, moody, angry at everything and nothing at once. My parents tried their best, but I made it a sport to rebel. Back then, my favorite method of protest was sleeping in the treehouse. We had this wooden fort perched in the backyard of our modest suburban home in New Jersey. My dad had built it when I was 7. Part birthday gift, part dad project. It had a shingled roof, 2 small windows, and a trapdoor with a rope ladder that creaked like it was whispering secrets. By the time I turned 13, I had claimed it as my personal exile. Whenever I got grounded, which was often, I'd grab a pillow, a flashlight, and whatever handheld game system I wasn't supposed to have, and disappear for the night. My parents usually let me. They figured if I was safe and within shouting distance, it wasn't worth the fight. This story happened on one of those nights. It was early spring, the kind of night when the air still had a bite, but the sky was clear and full of stars. I had just been grounded for mouthing off at school, something about attitude and responsibility. My punishment included no screen time, which, to my 13-year-old brain, felt like medieval torture. So naturally, after they thought I was asleep, I slipped outside with my Game Boy Advance SP tucked under my hoodie. I climbed the rope ladder and burrowed into the pile of blankets and old couch cushions I kept stashed up there. The wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The night felt peaceful. I played Pokemon Pearl until my hands cramped, stopping only to sip from a can of root beer I'd snuck out from the fridge. Eventually, the globe of the screen started to blur, and sleep crept in. I barely remember setting the SP aside before drifting off. And then I heard it. "Danny." The voice was deep, male, low enough that at first I wasn't even sure I'd heard it. My eyes snapped open in the dark. I looked around, heart thudding. Everything was still, until I heard it again. "Danny, are you up there?" This time it was louder, closer. I sat bolt upright, my breath caught in my throat. My first thought was, Dad. Maybe he'd come to scold me or bring me inside. But something about the voice was wrong. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even frustrated. It was calm, like someone trying not to scare me. I stayed frozen, trying to convince myself it was just my dad playing a weird joke. Then I saw it. The silhouette at the base of the ladder. A man, broad shoulders, head tilted slightly upward, staring through the trapdoor opening. I didn't move, just watched as the figure slowly began to climb. The wood creaked with every step. I could hear his breath now, measured, quiet. Then, as his head rose above the floorboards, I saw him more clearly. His features were swallowed in shadow, but his outline was unmistakable. An adult man, not my father. Too tall, too bulky, a stranger. And then he spoke again. There you are." His voice was soft now, satisfied. But he didn't move. He didn't climb all the way up. He just stood there, halfway through the hatch, staring at me. No expression, no explanation. Something primal kicked in inside me, a wave of fear so strong it nearly knocked me flat. I screamed. I screamed my father's name like it was the only word I knew. The man didn't flinch, but he moved, fast. He let go of the ladder and dropped, disappearing into the shadows below. By the time my dad burst out the back door in his pajama pants, flashlight in hand, the man was gone. I was still screaming when he climbed the ladder and found me shaking in the corner. "Danny, what happened?" "It wasn't you," I gasped. "It wasn't you." My mom came out moments later, robe fluttering in the wind, her voice tight with panic. When I told them what I saw, they didn't try to convince me I imagined it. They believed me. My dad was pale. He kept asking me to describe the man again and again. "It wasn't me," he said more than once, as if trying to convince himself. We called the police. They came quickly, took my statement seriously. They walked the yard with flashlights, checked footprints near the base of the tree. There were some vague impressions in the dirt, but nothing clear. No fingerprints on the ladder, no broken fences. The officer asked if I recognized the voice. I said no. "Are you sure he said your name?" he asked. I nodded. "Twice." He scribbled something in his notebook, then looked at my dad. "Any neighbors with odd behavior?" My parents shook their heads. The cops searched the block, questioned a few houses. Nothing came of it. No one else had seen anything. I never slept in that treehouse again. My parents offered later to tear it down, but I told them not to. I don't know why. Maybe I needed it to stay there as proof that it happened. Maybe destroying it would make me feel crazy. For years, I told myself it was probably a neighbor playing a cruel prank, someone who'd overheard my name and thought it'd be funny to scare me. But no one ever admitted to it, no one ever got caught, and the truth is, that voice didn't sound playful, it didn't sound drunk, it sounded like someone who knew me. Even now, decades later, I still wonder what might have happened if I hadn't screamed. Sometimes I'll drive past the old neighborhood when I'm in town. The house looks the same, but the treehouse is long gone, torn down after we moved out. I've asked my parents about that night. My dad still insists he has no idea who it could have been. He swears it wasn't a friend of his, no disgruntled neighbor. He remembers the fear in my voice, says he's never heard me scream like that before or since.